So we're now going to move on to the roundtable cocktail party. And we're going to sequentially invite everybody to start your videos so we can see each other. I think we have to do it almost one by one, so you'll get an invitation. And you don't have to start your video, but if you'd like to join in, it would be nice to see everybody's faces. And just to remind everyone, we're recording the symposium. So I think we've had a wonderful day of talks. Those were really tremendous range of subjects. And I hope you are all ready with the cocktail, ready for the cocktail party. A few of us will meet with Anthony after this event. We will maintain a suitable social distance now defined by Howard. And as is required for anybody in fluid mechanics, we will consume some multiphase drinks. And we will, of course, wash our hands in an energetic and high shear manner, and we'll probably converse in French. But before that, I would like to invite people on the call to say a few words, either about the day or about their own collaborations with Anthony. I know already that there are quite a few people who would wish to speak, and so I'm going to invite a few people to speak as we go along. But if you wish to put your hand up using the electronic hand, which is found under participants normally, when you press the participants button, then please do so. So to get us going, I'm very happy and it's a great pleasure that I invite George Pearson to say a few words. So George, hopefully you're able to speak and have your video up. There's George.
Simon, can you hear me?
We can hear you well, thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you very much to all of you for participating, or in Simon's case and others, and Herbert and John and others for organising what's been a splendid day. I've had the extra pleasure of being effectively in my father's company for the day, and I've been able to enjoy his great enjoyment. It probably didn't come across from seeing rather the top of his head far too often, but he's been very moved by the whole experience, so thank you. And I suppose I've been called in as a sort of lay speaker on the grounds that I'm not a mathematician, and I suppose my hope is that I can try and add a little to the extra comments that we've had from Herbert and from Henry about my father and other aspects of his life and his other passions. He has actually got a great many interests which he's developed and enjoyed through his long and very active life. And I'm going to, I suspect, distill those down into 4 particular ones and then add a 5th, which he shared very much with our mother, as Henry's probably watching, and Sophie possibly. Even Mark, you never know. Because they shared this together, I think it's well worth leaving to the end and making special mention of. So so the 4 I'd like to look at are sport, which has been mentioned both by Herbert and by Henry, music, languages, and to those who know my father well, wine has to be included. And if we start with sport, it's just as Henry was able to share a love of mathematics and fluid mechanics and dynamics in particular, I've always been able to share a joint love of sport, and that's been a particularly rich and rewarding part of my life. My father is what I would describe in sporting terms as a consummate amateur. He was not going to be constrained by someone suggesting that he should perfect an individual activity, more that he should just enjoy as many as possible. And he is, for those who know, and despite what Herbert said, he is actually, was in particular, a very naturally gifted ball games player. And he became very much more proficient in, for example, soccer, hockey, rugby, squash, lawn tennis, table tennis, water polo. And you'll see that involved small balls, big balls, medium-sized balls, and no balls at all. So it wasn't just that he was confined to a single area of physical activity. But if I had to pick 2 things that I think were particularly close to his heart and mine, they would be cricket and real tennis. And It's particularly timely. I appreciate there are many people watching or listening for whom cricket will always remain an utter mystery. But at the moment, the Indian Premier League is in full flow. And I think that despite his reservations probably about the pyjamas and the strange gyrations of girls on the boundary and lots of noise and strange extra activities, he, as a cricketer, was way ahead of his time and was a marvellous hitter of sixes, a miserly bowler, and an utterly fearless fielder. And he would have fitted in beautifully. In terms of the real tennis, he didn't actually take the game up until he was in his 30s. And not only did he become really a very reasonable, not to say good player, but he devoted enormous amount of time and effort and thought to initially saving the Real Tennis Club in Cambridge. I really doubt it would now exist if it hadn't been for the efforts of him and his great friend Peter Roth. Kill the telephone. And he was a great enthusiast for the game in its broadest sense. And he told me again today, just how proud he is of how he managed to visit and in fact play on, as far as I know, all of the courts that were operational and accessible. Some are privately owned and people are very difficult about letting outsiders even onto the premise, let alone play. He did the whole world in the latter part of the 20th century. Quite an achievement. The other thing about him, which I mentioned through water, is he's a great swimmer. He was, again, ahead of his time, loved the idea of unfettered swimming in lakes, the sea, anywhere he could set off on great long swims, much to my mother's concern at times. And I've always enjoyed the water, and I think it was probably because of all the trips he took us on to swimming pools and all sorts of strange antics in lakes and rivers. He had no idea about risk assessments or health and safety guidance. Many of you can probably imagine. The sort of last thing I would say, and those of you who've worked with him, I'm not sure whether he's the same as he was work, but very disciplined and very thorough, and as you say, a sort of moral scientific conscience. But when it came to sport, he really did not want to be constrained by established orthodoxies of technique. He was very happy developing his own, which was at times, I think, brilliant and other times very frustrating for those watching him. So that's sport. Music, it starts badly and then finishes much better. He's been telling me recently about how, when he was a child, the failure of his older brother to show suitable aptitude for playing the piano meant that his parents decided it was completely unnecessary for him to have any instrumental lessons or be taught to sing or anything. And that's, I think, a lost set of opportunities that he regrets to this day. However, he wasn't going to be put off by this, so he maintained a great interest in classical music, and in recent decades, he's developed a real love for opera. And unsurprisingly, he's become enormously knowledgeable about opera. He's travelled to many different opera houses in this country and much further afield. And, as is his way, he's got involved in what's called the Grand Opera Goers Society in Cambridge, and has chaired the committee for some years. As some of you know, he was, or I think was, I'm sorry, Herbert, you did mention, he was born and brought up for his early years in Cairo. And he was, for reasons I've still not quite understood, sent to a French Jesuit school at the tender age of 5 or 6, where they only spoke French. And this, I think, was, in a sense, a building block in the foundations of his great interest in speaking and reading in foreign languages. And I'm sure those of you who've dealt with him at SCL, they probably found him reading newspapers in French and Spanish and German and anything else he could lay his hands on. So he is, in addition to being fluent in French, he does seem to exhibit quite a facility in Spanish, Italian, German, Russian, and then a smattering of Arabic. And he's recently started trying to learn Polish, which he tells me is very tricky. I'm not in a position to argue either for or against that view. But he's always managed to put these skills to use. And from my experience, he's a great person for trying to put people at ease who are in this country and for whom English is not their first language, by speaking to them in their own language where he can, something for which I have great admiration. And of course, when he's travelled to other parts of the world, wherever it's been possible, he's tried to use his other languages. When we were children, some of our friends suffered similar experiences to some of you probably when giving seminars, when they made the mistake when questioned about whether they were studying any foreign languages. And particularly if they really blundered and said they were learning French A-level, or even in those days O-level. Of course, the immediate reaction was he'd break into his fluent French and expect them to follow suit. A humbling experience for all. So fourth, we move on to wine. And I suspect many of you are aware that as a fellow at Trinity Hall, he became wine steward for several years. And this was, I suppose, a marvellous opportunity for him to really start to develop his nose for wine. And he became really very knowledgeable. He continued to enjoy wine on the high table at Trinity Hall for very many years. And he still enjoys wine greatly. I think one of the things that I would say about him, and it probably won't necessarily surprise you, is that he has splendidly Catholic and what I would describe as refreshingly unstuffy tastes in wine. For example, it doesn't really make any difference to him whether it's a 98 Decem, which we had to celebrate his 90th birthday on Sunday, or it's a strange innominate blend of red wine we procured from what can only be described as a petrol pump in Provence in France. It doesn't really make a difference because you can still radiate an enormous enthusiasm for either or and both, and then tell us a great deal to widen our own knowledge of wine. And I still regard enjoying drinking wine with him as one of life's richer pleasures. So thank you very much, Dad, for that. And you probably aren't surprised to hear that he's managed to not avoid all sorts of vineyards and wineries as he has travelled the world. And he, as I say, his knowledge has become verging on the encyclopedic. So if we take the first three things, I think it would be true to say that my mother tended to be supportive rather than actively involved. And she was very supportive, but I think she didn't think it was her place or her interest to partake. Fortunately, she was always enthusiastic about wine, it's obviously strictly in moderation, but she did join in very enthusiastically in his interest for that. But it was their shared interest for the fifth thing, travel, that really helped to bring them even closer together and link them up with all of his other interests. And so whether it was visiting real tennis clubs in Australia, or my father practicing his Spanish in Chile, or it was going to an opera in Verona in Italy, or tasting wines in South Africa, they really did revel in their trotting round the globe. And although, as many of you aware has been mentioned, my father was very well travelled as an academic and as a consultant, it was after his retirement from SCR in 1995 that he and my mother really did manage to start what I'll describe their recreational travels and ocean cruising in particular. And it's a family joke that there aren't many places that we could find that they hadn't explored. But my father always argued that he really wasn't that keen on the Far East. But otherwise, few places escaped their visits. And it's a very interesting thing, thinking back through my life and how I've had what can only be described as a very difficult act to follow. He is, I would argue, genuinely polymathic. he has not only great skills and knowledge, but it's also that he has an appetite for learning about things and contributing to thinking on things that is unusual. And I think I can. He also has an openness and a how do I put it? An unaffected nature about things. He told me once that which wasn't that long ago, that he decided what being comfortably off was. And that was, you were comfortably off if you didn't have to worry about changing your supplier of utilities. And I thought that gave me a particularly apt view of his I suppose, his outlook on life. You can be comfortable without excess. And I really do appreciate the effort all of you have made. And I think it's a great way of demonstrating the academic community at its best, that people will give up the time, not just to take part in an event like this, but to organise it. So thank you. And if it wasn't for the constraints that we're all under, I would have said that now, and I mean, Simon has done a marvellous job of describing it as the cocktail hour, this would have been a great moment for a proper toast, preferably achieved with several cases of Paul Roger. So thank you.
George, thank you so much for that. That was a fantastic overview of Anthony and all his interests. I know there are many people who wish to speak, and I'm going to just invite Tim Pedley to say a few words now. We're just unmuting Tim.
Sorry, I was hitting the wrong thing, typical. Anyway, I'm also, like George, not actually going to talk about science, but I'd just like to reminisce briefly about my own first interactions with Anthony and his family. When I was a second-year research student, that's 1964 to 5, I went into a shared flat with 4 other second-year research students, and the flat was in 23 Chaucer Road. There were 5 of us, as I say, 2 fluid dynamicists, that's Michael McIntyre and myself, 2 astronomers, astrophysicists, Bob Sobey and Russell Cannon, and 1 physicist in radio astronomy, which was Malcolm Longair. And that was very exciting to be with them, because it was a very musical flat. I was the least musical of the people in it. It was the year in which Michael McIntyre was in the semi-finals of the BBC violin competition. And in the summer, when cycling back across the fens behind the Leeds school, on a warm evening, Michael was practicing in the box room on the top floor, which was the only place Emma would let him practice, because it got a bit loud. And so we had the skylight open. So cycling back across the fens, you heard strains of Brahms' violin concerto, and it was beautiful. It was a big house, still is, no doubt. There was not only 6 Pearsons and an au pair. There were us, 5 second-year PhD students. There were 5 also in a different flat, 5 Newnham undergraduates. And for those who don't know, Newnham was or is still a women's college. And it became, we made it perfectly clear that it was necessary that the connecting door had to be unlocked, because for fire precaution reasons. And in addition, there was a little bed sitter on the way in, which when I was there, Anthony and Emma rented to John Bridgewater, I think, who has subsequently been head of the chemical engineering department in Cambridge, etc. It was very exciting. The things about I didn't really, I should say, didn't really know Anthony particularly at that point. I mean, my first year as a PhD student, it was before the department moved to Silver Street, and I was in a little, had a desk in a little office on Free School Lane, and I don't think met Anthony that year. And of course, later, before I finished my PhD, I became aware of some of Anthony's important contributions, in particular the Marangoni instability paper, and even more significant, I subsequently came to think, was the Proudman and Pearson paper on low Reynolds number flow past spheres and cylinders, which essentially developed the method, which was later called the method of matched asymptotic expansions, to solve that problem. In parallel, I think, I mean, the Americans who did it was, forget, Lagerstrom, was it, and Coles. Anyway, that was an important, very important thing. But anyway, as I say, we didn't know him. The only two family events that I recall with any drama was one when George fell out of a tree and broke his arm. That was quite, it looked to me as if it would be terribly traumatic, but George seemed to recover very quickly. And the other was an observation of Anthony doing genuine chemical engineering practical work, i.e. rootling around under the manhole cover in the driveway because the sewers had got blocked. So it was a very friendly and relaxed place, and there were such good people to meet. So that's my reminiscence. And since then, of course, I've got to know Anthony very much better and always take pleasure in his company. And I wish we had Friday afternoon seminars every week again, because whenever Anthony was there, I tried to sit next to him because the asides were well worth hearing. Thank you for letting me speak, Simon.
Tim, thank you very much, Tim. Those are very interesting history to that early time, Chaucer Road. Now, before Higgins is going to speak next, but could I ask George to reinstate the rest of Anthony in the video, because we're now up to his nose. Thank you, George. If you can just tilt the camera. So, Julia, please speak. I think you need to unmute.
Okay, well, Hubert this morning went rather briefly. In fact, he actually ignored the fact that Anthony had spent 10 years at Imperial College. I'm not quite sure whether that was deliberate. It was just that Anthony had done so many things. But it was very important to me because that's when I first met Anthony. I joined the college in the mid-70s, and at that time, I'd come in from physical sciences, and my research area was neutron scattering. Now, my first PhD student joined me in '78, and Anthony was then the director of postgraduate studies, which meant, of course, that he had an oversight of all of the progress of the PhD students, and not least the talks they gave at the end of their first year to transfer registration from MPhil to PhD. So Karen, my first PhD student, gives a talk on neutron scattering in front of Anthony. And if she wasn't nervous, I most certainly was, because I had seen his activities with the other PhD students. And at the end of the talk, as we have heard several times, he's interested in clarity and logic and everything else. And he said to Karen, "Can you please tell me what use any of this is going to be?" And she was an innocent young thing. She certainly wasn't rude, and she didn't intend to be, but she looked at him with her eyes wide open and she said, "Well, I'm going to get a PhD." I was completely shocked by this reply. I thought, how is he going to react? But he took it extremely well. "Anthony, you were great. And I hope that in the years since, you've actually got to believe that some of what we do with neutron scattering is useful. I know we've had very good interactions over the years. I've thoroughly enjoyed meeting you in Cambridge and in other places. And you and Emma have been very kind to me, had me to stay in your house, and to some extent kept an overview. So meeting you all those years ago with Karen, but I have never forgotten that reply of hers. You won't remember it at all, but I would like to say very happy birthday, Anthony, and may there be many more of them.
Thank you very, very much for that. That was fascinating. Could I now invite Hilary Ockendon to say a few words too, please? Anthony, can you try and tilt your iPad so we can see a bit more of you? That's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to mention briefly the time that John and I worked on that problem of injection moulding that Henry mentioned, and how we came to interact with Anthony on it. In 1975, we were on sabbatical in Cornell, and we were working on the problem of forcing fluid with a temperature-dependent viscosity into a cold mould, where the issue is, of course, to get the fluid to fill the mould before it all sets. In early 1976, John had to go back to Oxford to teach. He somehow had got his sabbaticals not very well organised. And at that time, Anthony happened to visit Cornell, and he and I talked about this problem. I remember I had met Anthony before because he used to pop over to Oxford to play real tennis, and also to talk to Alan Taylor, who I know had very high regard for him. But this was the first time, I think, that we discussed any maths. And it was extremely useful and valuable, because Anthony was working on a very similar problem in which viscous dissipation was important. And then our two papers, which were mentioned before, were published in the same volume of JFM. But our paper had no viscous dissipation in it. And of course, that's also a very important thing in injection moulding. And later on, I was able to, using Anthony's lead, I managed to include the viscous dissipation in our inlet problem, and so sort of join the two papers up. Altogether, it was a serendipitous meeting, and we have enjoyed knowing Anthony and meeting him on many later occasions. Now, John is here and would like to butt in with a couple of sentences, if that's all right.
Hope you don't mind, Simon.
But let me say happy birthday before it's too late.
Yes, happy birthday. But just as a postscript to what Hilary said, I was most impressed when she produced this wonderful extension to the work we'd done together by including viscous dissipation, because I'd found that very difficult to do the asymptotics, and Anthony had obviously helped with that. And naturally, when her paper came out a year later, in 1978, I held her in the highest esteem. Gosh, I think I could have married someone with such an idea. And it's only in the last few weeks has it been drawn to my attention that, in fact, it wasn't all her idea. So I won't say any more than that, except that to say I think this is a great illustration of how there are two adjectives I would use to describe Anthony, well, two nouns really. They've been used before, but can I repeat them? His guidance was fantastic, and his inspirational skills out of this world. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you both very much. And I should just say that John and Hilary have been instrumental in organising this as well. They were part of the small group together that first proposed this and guided the structure for the day. So now I'm going to invite Mike Sheppard to say a few words. Just unmuting him. There we go. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Simon. So, happy birthday, Anthony. I noticed that everyone who talks seems to have known you for a very long time. And I feel I also have known you for a very long time, and it's been a great pleasure. So back in 1982, a small group of us, about 8 in fact, joined a recently conceived but not yet built research laboratory in Cambridge. And we were housed then in Janus House on Regent Street with the director, Bernard Vivet, who was tasked with establishing the new Schlumberger laboratory, which was then being designed by Michael Hopkins and which eventually opened in 1985 on the Madingley Road site. So amongst that small number of people were the nucleus of the mathematical modelling group. And that was the initiative of Anthony. So Bernard Vivet had approached Anthony to head up a fluid mechanics group, which was a natural thing for him to do, to go in pursuit of Anthony to do that. But Anthony had persuaded him that he should instead establish a mathematical modelling group, which would have a wider scope than fluid mechanics. And given that at that time, we didn't really know what the full range of technical challenges might be for this new laboratory, this proved to be an extremely wise decision. And in subsequent years, the group, in collaboration with the other departments in the lab, turned its attention to a huge number of things. Amongst them, we looked at multiphase flow, both in pipes and porous media, temperature modelling in oil wells, drill string dynamics, rock destruction and drilling mechanics, massive hydraulic fracturing, mud pulse telemetry, which was and still is actually the only means of communicating in real time when you're drilling a well with downhole sensors. And we worked on things like hugely important things, in fact, gas kick early detection. So if you know that's a potentially deadly phenomenon when you're drilling a well, and in extreme cases it can and it does destroy entire rigs. And we also developed a wide variety of interpretation models designed to facilitate decisions in real time while drilling. So many of these things would not have been done had it not been for Anthony's foresight and founding the mathematical modelling group. But let me say that life then and now with Anthony had more dimensions than just work. One of the pleasures of being in Anthony's team was the engagement with Emma. If we were in Anthony's team and he had hired us, then as far as Emma was concerned, we were bona fide. And we automatically became part of Emma's extended family. And Emma often travelled with Anthony, and it was really rather fun to be on the road with them both, especially when it came to Anthony showing us some of the finer aspects of life, some of which George has just alluded to. In particular, he taught us what wines we should be drinking and where we should go for fine dining in New Orleans or Danbury, Connecticut, or Houston, or Versailles, I remember. In fact, I remember swimming with Anthony in Versailles. And Anthony is, after all, as all those who know him will attest, a jolly chap. So one thing he believed in was that business travel should not be onerous. And so, for example, when leaving a hotel, he would appear with a fistful of dollar bills, which he would scatter like confetti to an enthusiastic team of hotel staff who competed to help Emma and Anthony during their departure. On one such occasion, the hotel staff, in their eagerness, took all of the Pearson luggage, which was voluminous, and under a shower of dollar bills, they loaded the bags into the wrong cab and dispatched it into the Louisiana night, never to be seen again. So Anthony, thank you for a wonderful time and long may it continue.
Thank you. I haven't heard that story before, Mike. That was very funny indeed. So next we have Marcel Crochet. Marcel, I think we've probably met 30 years ago in Belgium, but Marcel, please say a few words.
Okay. It's on? Yes.
Yes.
I met Anthony for the first time some 50 years ago. I think it was at a meeting in Glasgow on rheology, where I presented a paper on thermorheologically simple fluids. Anthony was chairing my session. He had quite a reputation. I had been told about his deep knowledge of fluid mechanics and rheology and his ability as a chair to raise critical questions. I found out that it was actually the case, but in the most pleasant way. I have always admired Anthony's scientific knowledge, curiosity, and science in general. He cultivates a marvelous attitude at combining mathematical rigors with his approach of problems of industrial interest. We have met later on many more occasions, international meetings, lecture series, including in Louvain-la-Neuve, and also at Schlumberger Research, Cambridge. I must say that beyond 1995, my professional career led me to other directions, and I missed these moments. Congratulations, dear Anthony, and happy birthday.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Marcel. That was excellent. And now I think we have Chris Farmer on the call. So, Chris, you are muted.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Oh, right. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for a chance to say a few words, and happy birthday, Anthony. Now, I've only known Anthony in person for nearly 20 years, but I was aware of his existence nearly 50 years ago when doing my PhD in the 70s. I was very interested in the analogy between turbulence and the flow of non-Newtonian fluids. And so I needed to study non-Newtonian fluids, and I acquired a copy of Anthony's book on the dynamics of polymers. And I was intrigued on page 1 to read about the theological equation of state, which still intrigues me to this day. There's no mention of it in the index. It only occurs in the introduction. But the reason I wanted to talk was really that about my actual interaction with Anthony. So I worked for a commercial organization that was acquired by Schlumberger in the mid-90s. And it was a huge stroke of luck, because on entering Schlumberger, you realize what a fantastic scientific organization it was. And a large part of that was apparently it was due to the presence of particularly Anthony, who combined academic rigor with commercial hard-nosed research. And but I didn't meet him until the early part of about 2002, 2003, when John Ockendon, who was hosting my fellowship in Oxford, suggested that I use my influence in Schlumberger to organize in-house study groups within Schlumberger. So Anthony turned out to be a particularly important person to know, because he helped me pull together this huge study group where we studied 6 problems, all from Schlumberger. And we organised this twice, once in Oxford and once in Cambridge, and then it carried on and other people organised it. But what was immediately apparent on meeting Anthony working on these problems, and he worked on several problems in the study group, was this hugely important emphasis on being very clear and being very rigorous. And some of the questions that he asked, I've never seen leading academics reduced to the sort of trembling mess that they were, just like some of the industrial participants. And I think this was the reason why Jose Adachi, who I'm sure Anthony remembers, working on fracking, he remarked that he'd never realized that applied mathematics was a contact sport, so he took part in one of these study groups where Anthony was one of the participants. So I want to thank you, Anthony, for the great support that you gave me when I was organizing these meetings, and happy birthday. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Chris. I think you are one of these people who have had your leg in two camps of the academic and the industrial, so thank you for that insight.
Thanks.
Next, I think Keith Moffatt would like to say a few words. So Keith.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Anthony. In particular, I'd like to thank everyone for the wonderful set of lectures that we've heard today, all so well reflecting the areas that Anthony has himself contributed to so much over more than 6 decades. Anthony, you reminded me recently that we first met at the Congress, the International Congress of Theoretical and Applied Mechanics in Stresa in 1960. Stresa on Lake Maggiore. Yes, 60 whole years ago. I was aware of you before then from seminars the previous year or two in Cambridge, but that's perhaps when you first became aware of me. I was merely a novice research student. You had already published these 3 wonderful papers in JFM that Herbert referred to in his opening talk. I have just acquired the proceedings of the 10th Congress in Stresa, which I have. I don't know if you have a copy, Anthony, but I intend to give it to you as a rather belated birthday present. There's a wonderful range of participants that are recorded, and you probably met many of them. G.I. Taylor, of course, among them. Alan Taylor that John Ockendon just mentioned from Oxford. John Miles, Owen Phillips, George Carrier, Don Coles, Leslie Kovasny, Philip Drazen, Loitsiansky. Adrian Gill was there, interestingly, just on his way to Cambridge from Australia. Klebanov. George Batchelor himself, of course, was there. He was elected treasurer of the Congress Committee at that meeting. And Trevor Stewart, who gave one of the invited general lectures. And in fact, this copy that I've acquired through Amazon of the proceedings was originally at the Library of the National Physical Laboratory, so probably donated by Trevor following that Congress. I hope to celebrate again with you, Anthony, at the next IUTAM Congress, which has been delayed by the pandemic, but is to be held in August 2021, coincidentally again in Italy, this time in Milan. But even more remarkably, you attended also the 1956 Congress in Brussels. And if you come to Milan, you will probably establish a world record for participating at 2 such widely separated IUTAM congresses. This would be a fantastic achievement given the great range of problems in fluid mechanics that you have cracked in the interim. I could also tell lovely stories about the 1964 Munich Congress, when you were kind enough to drive me and 2 others in your Volkswagen Dormobil at that time from Cambridge to Munich. But I think time just won't permit at the moment. I've always enjoyed, as others have also, the rapier thrust of your questions at Friday seminars in DAMTP, and I hope these may long continue. Your taste in good wine has also been mentioned several times now. Of course, that taste is impeccable. Do you remember the Brunello di Montalcino that we drank in Stresa? I know you enjoy good wine more than ever today. We've been enjoying wonderful wines at the home of your daughter, Sophie, over the last year or two, who's been entertaining us and you, and on these most enjoyable lunch occasions. Long may that continue also. So here's to your very good health, Anthony, and continuing enjoyment of life and fluid mechanics, both theoretical and gastronomic, through your 10th decade. I have a nice glass of good wine here to drink your health. Thank you.
Keith, thank you very, very much. That was excellent. Thank you very much. Next, I think we have Geoff Maitland would like to say a few words. So, Geoff.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. Hello, Anthony, and very happy birthday. I'm pleased that Julie Higgins had the opportunity to point out the missing 10 years of Anthony's career at Imperial College. And I just wanted to make a few comments about that. I was fortunate enough to be recruited by Anthony to Imperial College in the 1970s as a young lecturer, and I've been fortunate enough to work with him over a period of 30 years, both at Imperial and then at Schlumberger. And I think he taught me many, many things. I'm not a mathematician, but one of the most useful things he taught me about mathematics was that sometimes the most important thing is not to write the right equations down, but having done that, to know which terms to cross out. And the more you could cross out in an informed way, then the easier the problem was to solve. And I've taken that with me all through my career. So there are just three things I wanted to point out, Anthony, about your career at Imperial College, which was very successful 10 years there. You came to help set up a polymer, a pan-polymer activity at Imperial College to make it a centre of excellence. And there was the triumvirate of yourself looking after polymer processing, Jeff Allen, polymer science, and Gordon Williams with polymer mechanics. And I think that was a great team that I think set Imperial on the way to have a substantial presence in polymer science and engineering. And of course, one of the recruits at that time was indeed Dame Julia Higgins that we heard from earlier, and that legacy has lasted over all these decades. We've heard about Anthony's love of wine, which we all know about. Well, one of his important roles at Imperial College, as well as being Professor of Polymer Engineering, was he was chair of the Senior Common Room Wine Committee. And he did his best to drag Imperial College to the same cultural levels as the Cambridge colleges to be able to buy the best wine. And we had many enjoyable evenings tasting to make sure that the wine cellar was up to scratch. And then Anthony was always ahead of his time, as we've heard, not only in mathematics, but also with keeping up with technology. He was one of the first people at Imperial College to buy a video machine that enabled us to both record talks and to watch, in those days by the exchange of cassettes, long before the internet, talks by others. And I went along to his office one day, and he was very intently, I could see, looking at the television screen that he'd had installed in his office for this purpose. And so I didn't want to interrupt him, but his secretary, Susan, said to me, "No, it's all right, Jeff, you can go in." So I went in there, not wanting to interrupt this important lecture that he was watching, only to find there was Anthony watching the cricket on the test match on this screen. And we then all realized why he'd bought this video machine. It was not only to watch lectures on fluid mechanics and seminars. So those were a few of the highlights at Imperial College. And then Anthony went on to a great career with Schlumberger. And as we've heard, that continued right up to the present day. So, Anthony, I want to thank you very much indeed for all the help and encouragement and mentorship you've given me throughout my career. And it's been a wonderful occasion today. I want to thank all the organisers for doing that. And I look forward to meeting up with you again. It's a pity that we can't have the cocktail party and the Bollinger today, but no doubt soon we shall meet again at Scroff's, which for those of you online that don't know what Scroff's is, it's a drinking club of ex-Schlumberger people. And I'll leave Anthony, if he says a few words later, to tell you what the acronym Scroff's stands for. Anyway, all the best, Anthony, and congratulations, and here's to many years to come.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Very good to see you. That was very good indeed. And I think Walt wants to say something now. So, Walt, over to you.
Oh, well, Anthony, first of all, happy birthday. It's been a great day. For those of you who don't know me, my background is actually in the field from Schlumberger. So I first met Anthony back, I think it was probably about 1983, when I came to I was working for Anadrol at the time, and I came to a review which was being held in a conference room at the University Arms. It was before the building was there. And Anthony's always was in this meeting, and I think I was trying to make some comment about something, and eventually, I think slightly exasperated, he said, let Walt speak. I think he might know something from the field. And from then on, I'd always appreciated that you were able to take in what I understand and ask very pertinent questions about what was going on in the field, offshore, in these operations, and really have some interesting insights. And I heard Mike Sheppard talking about the types of things that were developed at the time, and I, in a very sort of visceral way, lived some of those things to understand how to use them and things like that. The kick detection and the data interpretation and so on. And every time I came to visit you guys in Cambridge, it wasn't just a question of taking back things that became products in the field. It was actually taking back understanding. And it was also because of the integrity with which things were done at SCR, that you could actually have trust in those things. As Mike said, once you see things like blowouts and you're able to predict them and having trust in that, and I think it was the integrity that you brought to that organization, as well as getting the insight and all these people that you put around and giving them mentoring. But from that day on, I always felt that we had a voice and you were prepared to listen and you were prepared to act on it. And I always appreciated the support, and I've always appreciated our very intelligent, enlightened conversations, and look forward to many more of them. Thank you very much, Anthony. And from all the people in the Schlumberger field organizations, thank you for all the insights. And it's not just the actual products and things, it's actually that understanding that helps you on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Walt. I think we're only going to do a couple more because we're now running out of time. So Dave, do you want to say a few words? Dave was helping out earlier today, so you heard from him before, but Dave would like to say a few words.
Thanks, Simon. It's been a great fun to listen to everybody, and it was very clear to me that we all know the same person. I hear some very consistent themes here. And I think one of the interesting ones was the question on Anthony could be quite ferocious. And I remember joining as a fresh-faced scientist as a postdoc, and Anthony, you really had to be on top of your game. in every way. You had to know your subject and you had to know how to talk about it. But this was fantastic because it instilled incredible discipline, and it's at a very, very high standard. He brought all the academic rigor to an industrial centre that was setting up, and that standard is still there today, which was marvellous. And I joined in '83, and I was in and out of Cambridge quite a long time. And I came back in 2009, and the young scientists, they still talked about this Anthony Pearson, and he could be fierce. And I would sit next to him in reviews, and actually I thought he was a teddy bear compared to how he had been in the past. But I also know what people meant about sitting next to him, because you got the best comments, because there were things he wouldn't say to the person presenting, but he would say to you. And I think the other thing, Anthony, you've got a great memory. So you were eagle-eyed if anybody tried to recycle anything. Yeah, there'd be the side comment, have we done this before? I've heard this. And it was like, yeah, he knew which report it had come out of. He could quote it to you. But that was okay, because if you brought something new, then it was all right. It wasn't that, you know, we couldn't look at things again. And I learned that from you. And that was a very valuable thing, that if nothing had changed, you probably got the same result. But if something had changed, either in the science or in the field or in the application, then it was worth looking at. So that was great. So there was a lot of continuity there. So I learned a lot from you there. But, you know, this wine thing comes along, and I learned from you on wine. I learned how to open bottles of champagne, because when we opened the lab, we used to have lots of senior visitors come, and we had champagne every time. So this was very good. We also, with Ian So, we started a wine tasting club, and we used to put you to the test with some blind tastings. I think Ian beat you on one. I remember it was a 1983 Paul Jabelet Crozes Hermitage. Ian got the prize and you didn't, partly because I knew Ian had tasted the wine before, but that's another matter. But I also remember, you know, you taught us stuff about wine, and I still vividly remember a dinner, and I was the sort of the token junior scientist who went along to this at the Garden House Hotel. And we were with Bernard Vivet and some of the heads of our companies. And the wine waiter, who was very attentive, came to you. And of course, you were given the wine list because everybody knew you had the best choice. So we would get a good wine. So you picked some nice wines. And then the wine waiter said, and so, sir, how many bottles? And you looked at him as if, you know, well, it's a fair question, but the answer was obvious. And the answer was an adequate sufficiency. And of course, to a wine waiter, this is a difficult thing, because this is open-ended. He could give you as many bottles as he wants, or what is a sufficiency? But anyway, I thank you for that, and I thank you for all the education you gave us in wine. Yeah, I thank you for all the great times that we've had together. They've all been described before. I don't need to add to them. So I just want to add that, yeah, congratulations on your 90th birthday. I'm very sorry that we're not sharing together. We did on your 80th, because Simon organised a great dinner with you and Emma that we did for your 80th. Your 90th has come, so it's a rather strange happy birthday. But it's happy birthday from me and all your other Schlumberger friends who can't be on this call today. So congratulations on 90 years, Anthony.
Thank you very much, Dave. Very well said, indeed. I think Herbert's been very instrumental in organising this. I have to say that Herbert was the original person who suggested today, and I think Herbert would like to say a few words now. So over to you, Herbert.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to make two points. The first is to ask a question, and let me say I have two reasons why I want to ask this question. One is because I know the answer, and hence I'd like to make it possible that I get invited to give a talk on it at Anthony's 100th birthday. And the second reason is that it raises the point that really Tim Pedley talked about in his talk. And the question is as follows: how come that a vast majority of work in fluid mechanics, especially in theoretical fluid mechanics, either looks at high Reynolds number flows, where all the viscous terms are neglected, or very low Reynolds number flows, where all the inertia terms are neglected. But on the other hand, the vast majority of real fluid mechanics is at Reynolds numbers of 10 or 100, really quite different, and yet the two agree. Why is that? Why are these two not totally different subjects? Well, okay, that's my talk in 10 years' time. And the second point I wish to make, and I want to make this because A, it's obvious, and B, it is a very strong point, and that is that a lion's share of the organization for this meeting has been due to Simon Biddleton. He has been just fantastic, imaginative, helpful, every positive word I can think of, and I think we should give him an applause.
Herbert, you're very kind. So we're just going to unmute Anthony now. Thank you very much for that, Herbert. I really appreciate those words. Anthony, the floor is yours. I'm sure you have a few words to say to all of these nice messages.
Well, the first thing I have to say is that I'm amazed that so many people have told so many stories about me, some of which I've completely forgotten. There were a few other little things that I felt that I might say. One is that it has been mentioned that I was born in Egypt and didn't come back till after the war. And when I came back, I had never had any indication that Cambridge had a university. I knew that they had discovered that they split the atom in Cambridge. That was about all I knew. And when I was at school, I had no feeling for going up to the university till my third year, my last year there, when the mathematics master came back from the war, and he was the person who put me on to Cambridge and taking scholarship at Trinity. I was only, when I was there, I was only a moderate student in my view. And I found myself surrounded by people who had much more skill in whether it was bridge or mathematics or playing games, whatever it was, there was always somebody who was far better than I was. I mean, as an example, there was Philip Safman. Some of you who in mathematics will know about Philip, but what you may not know, which I can say now because it was a long time ago, is that he got more than twice as many marks in part two of the mathematics tripos than the next person. And the next person was himself became a fairly distinguished applied mathematician. So I never got the feeling that anything that I did was of any lasting importance. And I suppose that I'm really rather surprised at all the statements that have been made today. For example, I had a contemporary who had noticed on the board that there was an advertisement for a Henry Fellowship at Harvard or Yale. And he said, go in for that, you'll get it. And I thought, well, all right, I'll go and sit there. When I went to be interviewed there, there was only one question asked. Will you be coming back to Trinity when you finished there? And I was able to say yes, and that was the end of the conversation. Just one question, one answer. And I have, to this day, I have no idea why he suggested that I should go. Anyway, it put off my getting married to Emma for a year. Well, I can't say much more than thank you to everybody for what you've said. I mean, you've reminded me of so many things in the past. Thank you very much.
Anthony, thank you very, very much. That was very nice to hear from you there. Just to finish off, I'd just like to say I'm sorry to those people who wish to speak. There were quite a few others who wanted to speak and weren't able to do so in this last hour. There are many people who made this possible today. First, I want to just say thank you to what I call the organising committee, which was Herbert, John Hinch, Andy Woods, John and Hilary Ockendon. There were quite a few discussions about how to do this, and it all came together. Then there were quite a few other people in the background with the invitations, the IT and other support. So Colin Miles, who's been sitting back here, has actually run the day on the IT side. A fantastic job, Colin. Dave White here, Elliot Faulkner, who's been doing things in the background, Kathleen Tu, Claire Savvy, Stephen Tobias and Andrew Clark, all who helped with getting invitations and other things out. I'd like to say thank you to the Schlumberger lab here in Cambridge for allowing us to run the event from this data lab. Of course, thank you to all of those in the last hour who've contributed with all those great stories. We've really enjoyed that. A big thank you to the 460 people who registered and all of those who have been following this throughout the day. I'd like to say a final particular thank you to the Pearson family and also particularly to Henry and George, who gave really good talks and speeches today. And of course, first and foremost to Anthony, who has inspired us all to have this wonderful event. Thank you very much. So thank you, everybody. See you later, Anthony. Sorry. That's it. Cheerio.